So in this chapter, I just kind of, I want to say barely, but I just kind of I barely touch on some constellations. And the constellations I do talk about, Orion, the Ursa Major, the Big Dipper, Ursa Minor, the Little Dipper. Um, um, those constellations would be fair game for a test. A lot of times students will say, I really want to be able to point to different sets of stars in the nighttime sky. And I guess this is my pitch, just to spend some time either at the labs this semester or ongoing. Take your sky map out, make it a priority. That's just the way kind of life is. So spend some time recognizing patterns of stars in the nighttime sky. But one of the things I'll kind of introduce to you to, if you weren't already aware, that actually, if you were to track a star through over a course of a period of time, you would see that star move. And actually, that's what's being shown here. They're called star trails. So not only that, but you would see them. Does it look like a bullseye? Well, it is a bullseye. And the way it works is we have a star called, you've heard of Polaris, okay? And Polaris is like at the center of the bullseye of stars throughout the course of the night. Polaris will be at different heights above the horizon for you, depending upon where your relative position to the equator. We'll talk more about that too. But I just wanted to kind of point out Polaris and that stars go counterclockwise, just like this. Now, if you were to take these counterclockwise motion and kind of widen it out, you eventually see that stars rise in the east and stars will set in the west. What else do you know that rises in the east and sets in the west? Well, the sun, right? The moon also appears to cross the sky coming from eastish to westish. So that motion of the sun throughout the day and the moon and the stars, that's all due to the Earth spinning on its axis of rotation. So to kind of introduce you to that. So one of the celestial objects we've talked about is something called the Milky Way. And this is a very pretty picture. This right here is kind of a haze, kind of milky white that goes from horizon to horizon. And what you're looking at, remember, we talked about this before, is you are looking into the, this is the disk of our galaxy. So this is the disk of the Milky Way. The Milky Way, remember, is a galaxy of stars. Our sun is is a star that orbits the center of the Milky Way. And of course, we're kind of tag along, the planets tag along. These regions above the disk and below the disk, I'll remind you, we have a word for that. That's called the halo region around our Milky Way galaxy. Just amazing. And I double checked and ended up getting my information from Wolfram Alpha. And there are, let's see, according to that source, 200, I know that's a lot, a wide range, 200 to 400 billion stars in this one galaxy. I say amazing. So back to constellations, right? Throughout the eons, different cultures have made different pictures of. We have made pictures of sets of stars in the nighttime sky we call constellations. So in case I forget to mention it, different cultures have different pictures, and that just kind of amazes me. We're going to stick with just the normal, what our I guess European sort of culture has grown up with, our sets of stars, but it amazes me. Another thing, I wonder if, thousands of years from now, are there going to be different pictures even? So, about these sets of stars that we see, it's kind of amazing that we see sets of stars at all. Now, these sets of stars, for instance, we're going to look at, take another glance at the set of stars known as Orion. And those stars of Orion, actually, even though they look like they're kind of like they look like they make a picture, and they look like they're kind of set in stone. So the fact that we're orbiting the sun, and we know that actually the sun is kind of zooming around the center of our galaxy and kind of bobbing up and down with regard to its neighbors, we talked about that motion of the sun, that fact should mean that the stars because they're different distances from us, should make a different pattern in the nighttime sky. But Orion is basically Orion, and this is to say that the sets of stars appear to be in the same relative position even though we're moving. And that can only be true because of something we call parallax. Parallax kicks in when objects like these stars are so far away that our motion is very insignificant relative to their distance between us. Okay, so that's called parallax. More about that later. So I mentioned Orion. Here is Orion, and test question somewhere, and I don't know what form it'll be, but the nighttime sky, or the stars in the sky itself, is broken up into 88 pieces. They're not equal pieces, but they're 88 constellations up there. Modern constellations, we would call them. Now, we're not privy to, we can't see here at our latitude all of the constellations. If you were willing to go from pole to pole, North Pole to South Pole, eventually you'd see all the constellations. But let's just take a look at Orion. Okay, very cool, very cool. Orion is kind of a fall constellation, so not up yet, right? Beginning October or November, we should be able to see it. So the neat thing about Orion is that these are called the belt stars, and these three stars kind of, to me, what I do is I see them, if this is the horizon, I kind of see these belt stars kind of rising first, or that's the first part that I see, that I recognize. And of course, part of Orion is already up when it's rising, but you'll see what I mean hopefully this fall. So there's the belt, and here's the sword, and in the sword is the nebula. Remember, there are different types of nebula, but basically what nebula have in common is it's a region of space between the stars that has gases. Okay, we have Betelgeuse, is a star in the winter triangle, and of course these four stars are kind of easy to pick out too. Orion. See, I love the constellations too, but it's easier to show them to you than to kind of talk you through it here. So there's Orion again. I don't know if you can kind of pick it out. Let's see if we can. Here are those belt stars I was talking about. Here is the sword hanging from the belt. The four kind of stars that kind of outline, I think, more like his toga. Okay, so that's the constellation Orion. Now you can see the yellow boundary. All of the stars within that boundary are stars that belong to the constellation Orion. And they usually use Greek letters starting with the alpha star, like Alpha Orion would be the brightest star in that boundary, usually. Okay. Let's see what else we have. Okay, so I'm going to kind of zoom into this picture, but you can see things in this picture include the Big Dipper. And let me go ahead and say what the Big Dipper is. We all love the Big Dipper. We all love the Big Dipper, but the Big Dipper is what we call an asterism. Asterism. Sounds like a bad word, but it's not. Okay, an asterism just is a subset of the real constellation. And in this case of the Big Dipper, the real constellation is the Big Bear, Ursa Major. Then I'm going to show you Polaris. Actually, we can find Polaris from the Big Dipper. And then, let's see. Okay, so let's take a look. All right. Yeah, there's just something reassuring about finding the Big Dipper in the nighttime sky. You're like, oh, that's wonderful. Okay, so here is the Big Dipper. Okay, the Big Dipper is, let me kind of zoom in a little bit more here. The Big Dipper has a handle. Okay, it's got 1, 2, 3 handle stars, and it's got a pair of bowl stars. Okay, so like I said, this actually is a subset of the Big Bear, Ursa Major. Now, if you take these two farthest bowl stars, they're farthest from the handle, take these two farthest bowl stars and go up, the next star you come to, and it won't be very bright, but is Polaris. So that is Polaris. Right there. And Polaris is the handle, the end of the handle in 1, 2, 3 stars that make up the handle of the Little Dipper. Okay, so this is the Little Dipper. And just like the Big Dipper, the Little Dipper has 4 bowl stars. Now, I'm going to warn you that the Little Dipper is hard to see. I'm told by my viewing friends that if you can see all of the stars in the Little Dipper, you've got some good viewing conditions. All right. So what else can you do? Well, you can do a few other things with the Big Dipper. You can take the handle of the Big Dipper and you can, what we say, arc to a really pretty bright star called Arcturus. So the name of this, you arc to Arcturus. It looks kind of like a kite, doesn't it? This is the constellation of the herdsman. This is Bootes. So Arcturus is in the constellation Bootes. It's a pretty bright star. And then you could, if you take that arc and keep going, you can, what we say, speed to the star called Spica, which is in the constellation Virgo. Virgo is kind of a hard one to make out, but Spica is pretty bright. And then if it's up that time of the year, you can take the other 2 bowl stars, okay, the bowl stars that are closest to the handle, and you can go down and you can go into the heart of Leo the Lion, a star called Regulus. Okay, now Leo is not always up. Okay, so let me go ahead, and I like Leo. Leo the Lion has a sickle part. Sickle. And it's neat because you'll see, it's neat to see the sickle up in the sky, set of stars. And then it has what I call the triangle part, or his butt part. That makes little kids giggle. Okay? Come to the observatory. All right. Let's see. So, here is an emphasis on, you see those dot dots? Okay? Those dot dots are pointing out, it's not even an asterism, it's just a shape in the sky. So we have the winter triangle. And of course, to make a triangle, you need 3 stars. And these 3 stars are in 3 separate constellations. So we have Betelgeuse, the star called Betelgeuse, just like the movie. And I've heard it pronounced a couple different ways. And Betelgeuse is in the constellation Orion. Then you have the star called Procyon in the constellation Canis Minor. Canis means dog, minor means little, so that's the little dog, Procyon. It's another bright star. And even brighter than that, we have the star called Sirius, seriously, in the constellation Canis Major. So that would be what? Big dog. Okay, so that makes up the winter triangle, which will be here before we know it. All right. So one last slide. We have the summer triangle, which actually it's kind of early, getting ready to start fall here. So we should be able to see we do see the summer triangle still right now. So let me kind of hone in. The summer triangle is also 3 different stars, or 3 stars in 3 different constellations. And as you see these dot dots, that actually is the Milky Way. There is a cool constellation called Cygnus the Swan. And it is right here, Cygnus the Swan. Cygnus the Swan also kind of looks like a cross. So the same constellation is sometimes called the Northern Cross. And the deal with the swan, and there's stories about this, is it's smack dab in the Milky Way. So actually up here is the head, and down here is the tail. So we say Cygnus is flying up the Milky Way. And here are its arms. Okay, so anyway, the summer triangle is made up of 3 stars. We have Deneb from Cygnus, and then we have Vega from the constellation Lyra, and then we have Altair from the constellation Aquila. Those are outstanding constellations that make up what we call the summer triangle. Let me go ahead and point out, and this is this Delphinus. I just think it's adorable. Okay, it's just a very cute group of stars. And then the last one shown here is a cute little, the Arrow, group of stars called Sagitta, the Arrow. Let me go ahead and kind of back out here. Now, I will encourage you, if you don't have a smartphone, or even if you do have a smartphone, that you have access to a sky map. I really like the program Stellarium. Stellarium.org. Okay, and that is something. It's a free download. It's what do I call it? Freeware, and so they take donations. Okay, But Stellarium is awesome. You can put it on your PC and you can see the nighttime sky. If you're trying to find the moon to do the moon journals, Stellarium, I'm kind of encouraging this semester students to check it out.